Imani Mitchell is a co-founder of Black Women United, an organization dedicated to the education, protection, and advancement of Black women. Imani is an activist in the community and joins me to share her perspective on civil rights, next on Studio Sacramento.
At Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the Capital Region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Imani, you say that movements don't always have to be large scale, and that's what we typically think about in movements. And that sometimes just the small day-to-day things of checking in with someone are equally as important. When you founded Black Women United, what was the problem you were trying to address?
I wanted to create a space for Black women where we could be celebrated for who we were, where in this space all Black women were welcome, despite our differences in class or religion, maybe even in sexuality. So I wanted this inclusive space where we all could be and speak and convene and celebrate each other. And that was what led, myself and 4 other women to create the Black Women's March. And this is a big day and it's a big event. But I think the theme of the Black Women's March and the meaning behind it is something that we want people to carry on, throughout their lives and, throughout the rest of the year. And it shouldn't just be dedicated to one day that you celebrate Black women. Ideally, it's throughout your life. So.
And the current celebrations, whether related to civil rights or women's rights, where were they lacking, or where are they lacking in addressing the specific needs of Black women?
I think, well, on a big scale, a lot of people have recognized the Women's March as a space where, a feminist space where women of all kinds have come together to, march against the Trump administration and various things. But I feel, though, that even with the Women's March in the first year it happened and the local marches that happened, that there were still women of color, queer women, trans women who felt like these spaces were not inclusive. And I think we found through history that often feminist spaces were not always inclusive, and that they were often very white-centered and white, straight woman-centered. And so for many of us, we had to make these decisions of, if I'm in this feminist space, in this space, I'm just being a woman. So if I bring up my Blackness, right, maybe I'm being seen as divisive, and I'm creating an issue. And so I think no one should have to do that. I think that all of us are complex and all of us have identities about us, and that those should all be respected and tolerated and understood to a degre.
The famous author, Alice Walker, who wrote The Color Purple, has done a lot of writing on the subject of the particular needs that Black women have when referencing empowerment. And she coined the term, or at least she was one of the people that coined the term womanist. Womanist. How are the needs of Black women as they're expressed different from those of white women, at least according to the womanist perspective?
Yeah, I think when you look, back to this idea when she created womanism, it was directly calling out anti-Blackness that she experienced in feminist spaces. I think when we look at the difference between white women and Black women, there are similarities first. I think if we look at, reproductive rights, or if we look at, rape culture and things that really impact all women, there are a lot of similarities. But I think there are differences when we look at the wage gap, when we look at the fact that Black women are paid less than white women and Latinas are paid less than Black women. When you look at profiling, I think being Black and being a woman is a very unique experience. And sometimes when we're with women, our blackness cannot be affirmed. And when we're within our own community, our womanness cannot be affirmed either. So I've been in, spaces in the Black community, activist spaces, where bringing up the fact that I'm a woman and that, I deserve to be heard, and that, that I'm valid, that creates an issue, that's also divisive in some ways.
Really?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, with the Black Women's March, we had expected we'd get like this outpouring of support, and we thought, well, hey, who wouldn't want to support Black women, in the Black community? But there were a lot of people who felt that, well, why do Black women need a march? And isn't that just more division in the Black community? And so, I mean, we kind of got it from all sides. But we did get support, though, so I don't want to act like we didn't. But it was just interesting.
Well, historically, one perspective is that Black men were the outward faces of the civil rights movements and won the awards and were on stage. But it was Black women who, in the background, actually did the heavy lifting and did the work.
Right.
And I just want to get your perspective as to how do you think the civil rights movement today is evolving and changing compared to where it was during, the sort of glory days of the 60s, at least the glory days in the minds of many, but there were these other issues that were right below the surface.
Right. I mean, things have changed. I mean, I think the fact that myself and other young Black women are, seen as leaders in the community, and that our voices are respected, but we had to earn our stripes. So we weren't really allowed, we couldn't just show up and say, hey, listen to me. We had to kind of put in the work and form an organization and put on an event. But things have changed. I mean, like you were saying, I think in the past with the civil rights movement, I mean, my mom, I remember she told me that she was in college, and this was just like a BSU, it was like a Black student union, and they were pushing these kind of radical politics and very pro-Black, and but for women, for Black women, their role in the liberation or the revolution was to cook for the Black men, to clean, to, visit them at their home, and all these different things. Like, that was their contribution. And it was this very domestic sort of, view of it. So now, of course, we have Black women who very much can stand on their own as leaders, who will not take no for an answer. And I think that's a really cool thing. I mean, Tanya Faison, who is the leader of the Sacramento chapter of Black Lives Matter, I mean, it's just completely knocked down doors, and she's been the leader now for at least, I think, 5 years or so. And so, I mean, she's one of the most prevalent leaders in Sacramento, and I think that's really, really cool.
In distinctly standing in your own voice, I'm curious as to what's been the specific reception that you and your colleagues have received in doing a initiative and a movement that's singularly about Black women by both Black men and white women?
Yeah, so we got, so from a lot of white women, there was, from both ends, it was this argument about divisiveness, and it was about people not understanding the need for it or the necessity of it, and almost being sort of offended about the fact that we would go and create something like this. Yeah. I mean, we would get, the first year that we put together the Black Women's March, we had like the hate emails and people sending us stuff. And I think I was very naive because I knew our intentions and I knew what we wanted to bring to the city. So I just thought, oh, people will love it and people will be so supportive. But there were still some naysayers. There were some people that weren't a fan. So it's tricky. It was hard in the very beginning because it was hard to get that support. But I think after like the second march, and now that Black Women United has really formed and kind of has some legs in the community, I imagine the organization will go on to do many great things, and that's, what I wanted for it.
Well, not to go too far down the rabbit hole on this, but one of the reactions, as I understand it, is an assumption that in order to be pro-Black woman, you're either anti-white white woman or anti-black male. How do you respond to that, to people who might hold that view?
I don't think it's true. I think that Black women and our liberation or our need for equity is rooted in everyone else. I think that you want the people who are deeply impacted to do better because it, I think, elevates everyone. We used to say, even me, I mean, I'm a Black woman and Black women face, you know, oppression, but also trans Black women are some of the most impacted and marginalized people in our society, period. And we've always firmly thought that if you raise up the person, right, who is the most impacted, everyone else will rise up too. So it's not about division, it's about uplifting everyone and seeing everyone and making sure that all of us are represented and respected. And
what is the voice that Black Women United and the women who comprise it, what's that voice speaking to this region? What is it that you want all of us to hear?
I think the biggest thing that when we started the org, what we wanted people to know was that Black women were multifaceted, that we didn't have to be respectable or talk a certain way or dress a certain way to be respected. I think the fact too that we were young and that some of us were single mothers and that some of us were students, some of us were heavily in our careers, or, you know, I think that too was a part of what we wanted to share with the community, that we can be leaders as well, that we should promote leadership amongst youth and Black youth. I mean, I was 24 at the time. I think that's kind of youthful, more youthful. But I think it's important, though, to, as youth are emerging and they're finding their voices in our communities, to create a space for that and not be so, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you're kind of young, to really uplift that and listen to what they have to say.
Are there any sort of programmatic or societal objectives that you all are trying to accomplish?
I think at the time, so the mission statement, it said that BWU is dedicated to the education, protection, and advancement of Black women. And so before I had resigned from the organization, we had talked about ideas of creating, shelters for Black women in the community. We had talked about curriculum, sort of creating a education program that we would distribute to different schools, with the idea of helping Black girls and other girls of color to deal with self-care, colorism, talk about womanism. Introduce some of these things to them as they're in school, and it's sort of tailored for them. And so these were some of the things that we were talking about before I'd left the organization. So my hope is that through that formation and through what we discussed and what we built, that the organization will just move forward with all those things.
One of the big discussions going on in the country right now actually has to do with the national organization related to the women's marches, and that there is a division right now between the founding leadership of that organization, which were women of color and then Caucasian women. And there seems to be a bit of a controversy if your organization was founded to speak with a clear voice on Black women's issues here within our region. It seems that this is not a Sacramento isolated phenomenon, because while the issues of division at the national level are many, there does seem to be a common theme here. What do you think?
I know it's unfortunate. It seems like at some point organizations, sort of implode or people disagree. I think it's hard to get away from that because we're all passionate people and we all work really hard. And I think with the Women's March, the whole thing has been very interesting to me.
How so?
Well, Tamika Mallory, I saw her speak on it. She was on The View talking about it, and she said something along the lines of, I think it's interesting that I am being discredited because of something that a man has said. And in this in this very like feminist lens, this is problematic.
Actually, step back for just a second and give us a capsule of the dispute that's going on
Yeah.
that Tamika Mallory was speaking to.
Sure. So Tamika Mallory, she's one of the founders of the Women's March, the National Women's March, and she was seen at a speech for Louis Farrakhan. It was one of his like big speeches. A lot of people were there, and she was invited there. And I think she may have posted a photo while she was there, so people saw she was there. And someone made this connection saying, well, you know, Louis Farrakhan has made anti-Semitic comments in his speeches. And so therefore, you know, you being there and you being in some sort of association with him, you know, one could say that you are anti-Semitic. That was what they said about Tamika Mallory. And so her response to that, as I was saying, was sort of, why should I be taking the blame or taking the heat for comments that, one, I didn't say, and also for comments of a man? Why am I the one that is being completely discredited because of him? And I think for me, I don't have exactly an opinion on the whole thing. It does seem unfortunate because it seems like they've, you know, done pretty well so far. They've been, you know, in existence for about two to 3 years. And they've done a lot of good work, it seems. But yeah, it's just it's an interesting thing, and I think there's an argument on both sides.
What are the big issues from your generation's perspective and the work that you've done related to civil rights where the conversation is really going to be focused today and for the next few years?
I think the biggest things I've noticed in this generation is accountability is big for us now. I think mental health is big for us now. And I think also too, we're in a sort of call-out culture. I don't know if you're familiar with the call-out culture.
I have no idea what that means.
But a lot of people now feel that, you know, no longer are we sort of hiding away from people who do problematic things or harm people in the community. Now is the time to call these people out. So you'll see on social media a post is made, or, you know, an article, a blog exposing someone. I mean, R. Kelly, the reason why this whole documentary got revved up is because some article was released calling him out for all these different things he's done. And
to young women.
To young women, and he's continuing to do. And so we are in this generation now where people are no longer saying, you know, that person over there does things that aren't okay, but we'll just kind of dismiss it. We're now in this generation of saying that person is not a good person. We need to let people know. And
that's interesting. That started really with the Me Too movement in terms of calling people out, and it has continued on. How do you respond to people who say that while there has been a lot of delayed and much needed recognition of people who have abused, and in this case we'll say women, that we've gotten to a point where all issues rise to the same level, and that there's no nuance or calibration between one person's actions and another person's actions, and it's just a zero tolerance. 5 decades ago, 7 decades ago, it just doesn't matter.
I mean, I think you raise a good point, and I think that's one of the things we have to look at as we're calling people out, right? And that, do we paint everybody with the same broad brush stroke? Do we say this person's canceled and this person should be fired, this person should be too? I mean, from what I've seen, some people say, well, if we say that we are if we are saying that we don't stand for, you know, sexual assault against women, or if we say that we don't stand against, you know, pedophilia, then we need to apply that to everyone, and we can't give passes to people. I think, though, that sometimes those situations are complicated, and I think we still have to also be critical and analytical when looking at certain things, and not just immediately say, hey, throw this person away. But I guess it's just kind of like a case-by-case basis with this.
It's interesting because one of the smaller movements that's going on in this country right now, as part of the civil rights evolution, are discussions that are popping up all across society on implicit bias and historic exclusion. One of the primary tenets of those types of conversations is getting people to get past their facades and to have real conversations. But at the same time, because of, at least in the moment, the actions have been pretty uniformly where to speak of something that is outside the guardrails of propriety, the person is immediately pasted on social media or essentially rejected. That in some ways, are activists frustrating the ends they seek because people, in being forthright in order to have a dialogue, are communicating things that are unpleasant but otherwise are hidden?
I think that's a very great point. I think that we want people to, so I could get that it's frustrating on both ends, because as an activist, as someone who has dealt with someone saying something that maybe is kind of off key or maybe a little bit prejudiced or a little bit ignorant, and wanting to kind of educate that person or show that person, hey, that's not exactly correct. But then there are the people who still will push and push, a conversation or an ideology. And at that point, the amount of energy you're exerting trying to sort of, teach this person or make this person understand, it may not really be well spent. I think I hate to say, Google it, but I do feel that now we're in this time that we're in, there has been a copious amount of, studies and dissertations and blogs and articles about, racism and prejudice, implicit bias, how to be a good ally, right? And I think that a lot of people, if they really, really want to do that, can also do research by themselves and take those steps, take that initiative. But I think someone who earnestly wants to know better and do better, I think those people should be met with some sort of understanding, and open arms. But I think, as we all know, there are still some people who sometimes their intentions are not as positive, unfortunately.
I like your reference to open arms. And one question that comes up all the time is whether or not single focus movements, for instance, in your case, Black women, whether the civil rights struggle has changed in one way at least, where it is that in the 60s, there were many people of many different backgrounds participating in things like the freedom rides and things like that. And that today, it seems that in some cases, the proxy for authenticity is that if you are not of the background in question, you really can't be a fellow traveler. You can't really be involved in the movement. Do you have any insights for us on what causes that?
I think, some of these spaces, so for BWU, it was vital to us that there was a space for Black women to just be, for Black women to talk about our own issues, to laugh, to cry, what have you, in our own space. But I also think that, you can't have a revolution or a movement in a bubble with just you and the people that experience the thing, going in. You need also everyone else, right, to support you and uplift you as well. So allyship is super, super important. And I think with a lot of movements that you'll see in Sacramento or some of the protests, if you look at with Stephon Clark in that recent shooting, that you saw people of all different walks of life out there, for this Black life that was lost. And so that is, I think that's vital to the movement. And in the civil rights movement, we saw white allyship as well too. So all of us, I think, have to be a part of it, but I also understand when it's needed for a certain group to have a safe space to be who they are.
Thank you so much, and good luck on your journey.
Thank you.
And that's our show. Thanks to our guest, and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syphax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the Capital Region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.